We all love a good story. Stories of love and life. Stories that entertain and inspire. And the best stories are the ones that happen to be true. Every Friday night, Jack Devnarain is live in conversation with an iconic South African personality who shares the true stories that shape their remarkable lives. Join us for reality radio as real as it gets. From 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. every Friday night, only on 919. Reality radio, as real as it gets, only on 919.
Hey, happy Friday. You're listening to 919. My name is Jack Devnarain, and this is Reality Radio. It's what we do every Friday night from 6 to 7 p.m. We have a guest live in studio, and we talk about the stories that shape our lives. And tonight, it is absolutely amazing to have a really good friend as our guest in studio tonight. Where do we start? We've got international speaker, humanitarian, social justice, warrior, defender of human rights, all these incredible labels, and an adventurer as well, Constantinides. It's amazing that you're actually here. I can't believe we've secured some time with you.
It's an absolute honor. How wonderful to have this chance to sit with you, to connect with you, and to catch up. So thank you for the absolute delight to be with you this Friday.
Well, you know what? It's all about real people talking real stories. That's what reality radio is all about. So it's something that I learned when we first met many years ago. I think we were both going into a radio station at around the same time, and already you were kind of working out. You were in the middle of a campaign, and I think the campaign at that stage was Miss Earth. You're still very much an environmentalist, right?
Yes, very much so.
Okay, so what drives you as an environmentalist? What are the big things what are you concerned about? So in South Africa and globally?
There's a lot of things that I'm concerned about, and those stem very much from not just the really big problems that we're faced with as a society, as a global village, but it's driven by what I've seen and what I've experienced, and that is that climate change is really real. I've worked and stayed in villages across Africa that no longer exist because those people have had to become climate refugees. And this is a real term. At the time, I didn't realize what it was. Yeah. But when people have to leave where they live because they no longer have access to water, they no longer are able to just live in harmony with nature, because nature has changed so viciously because of human intervention, you see climate change really being real. When you know that, every single one of us is dependent on a farmer every single day of our lives, be it with what we eat, that cup of coffee or cup of tea that we can't start our day without. Yet we don't understand that we're then connected to climate change because every farmer is impacted by a climatic change wherever they might be in the world, be it Colombia, be it in Ethiopia, wherever it might be. That coffee bean is no longer the same coffee bean that our great-great-grandparents would have been able to enjoy because the pain and struggle of farmers on those coffee plantations right now is impacted by climate change. And I think that here in South Africa, we would never be able to not acknowledge that energy is a huge crisis. The fact that we have not invested enough in renewable energy from a long time ago has allowed us to be in the problem we're in now. I'm not going to be fanatic and say, well, we have to eliminate coal completely. But what I am saying is that there is and was always a space for a renewable energy mix with coal as a coal-dependent country. And so definitely energy is a huge problem. Food insecurity is a massive challenge.
So those go together, right?
They go hand in hand. Yeah. And then if you look at waste for me is a huge issue. And it's one of those things that just doesn't get spoken about. We don't connect ourselves again to waste. And for me, my job has always been, how do I connect the dots? How do I make people understand that, yes, they can call me a bunny hugger or tree hugger, and I'll take that with pride, yes. But we're all impacted by climate change, and we all actually have to be earth warriors. We all have to find it in ourselves to understand that actually we're creating waste. We don't think about everything that we purchase. Where does it land up? We throw it away, but where is away?
So the idea of, I can see also that because you have committed yourself to the path of activism, Do you try to take more people with you on that path as well? Do you want to make them passionate activists? Do you think people are buying into it? Do they buy into you and then the message, or is it the other way around?
Well, I certainly hope I'm building an army. It really is important. You can't go to battle and to war on your own. Sometimes you have to, and you have to face the fire on your own until people actually understand what it is you're doing and say, actually, sometimes people still don't understand, but they support you because they believe in you.
Yeah, I think that's an important point. I'll tell you why. Because being in the media space, we come across activists all the time. In fact, it's can sometimes be an awkward label to wear. But I have found that there are as many activists who, by their zeal, sometimes by their unbridled passion, that they actually turn people away from the cause that they are trying to get people. A good example is people look at Greta Thunberg, right? And they think, she's terrifying. And you want people to look beyond that, to get into the substance of what the message is. But there is a reality to this as well. Do we as activists unintentionally turn people away because of how we present ourselves in the message?
I must be honest, I've never thought of it in that way. And I think that possibly is a predicament. If you actually look at that, potentially that is something that is a predicament. And so I think also the hardcore activism work that one does, you're so focused on what it is you're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
It's not about the brand point and what is the perception of what you're doing.
Yeah.
And sometimes people are looking at, they don't realize it's the perception, but they are buying or walking away from that perception.
Right.
And so I think that's very much what you're alluding to. Greta is a good example, but I really think that we're living in a time and age where climate change, for example, is something that I don't think we can now shy away from the fact that climate change is real. We're impacted by it every single day. As South Africans living in a third world part of the world, a third world country, in many aspects. However, we live in silos in this country ourselves. We live in pockets or silos where we don't realize that actually there's a reality outside of the space that we are living in. And so for me, if I can bring that reality home, there are people who are living in Sandton and literally 12 kilometers away, there are people living in absolute squalor in Alex Township. Yeah. And because they live in a bubble, they don't realize it. So if you are able to somehow connect with people where they are, but extend what their bubble looks like, for them to understand that actually, specifically as South Africans, we have an immense responsibility to be active and engaged citizens because X, Y, and Z. It cannot be that inequality exists in a living space so close to one another and we close and shut ourselves off from what is going on.
I think the bubble concept is a very powerful one because it explains a lot about why we don't extend ourselves. So if somebody had to say, I live in this Sandton comfortable, cosseted world, but everything I have here is what I earned for myself. And yes, I have a bubble around me because this is how I protect my family. This is how I'm able to control my circumstances. And it sounds interesting what you're trying to sell me here, but how is it practically possible for me to extend myself or extend the bubble that I worked so hard to create?
I think this is the challenge for every South African. But within that bubble, in that specific example, we have someone, sometimes perhaps one or two or three people that work inside of our bubble and then leave our bubble every day to go to a circumstance and space that is very far removed from that very protected space we have created for ourselves, and we have every right to do so. And safety is an issue, so we create even higher boundaries around that bubble. But if we look at our everyday circumstance. We drive on the streets of Johannesburg where there's somebody pulling at least 2 or 3 tons of plastic or waste, some kind or form. And we are sitting in our air-conditioned car. It's 35 degrees outside. We're so irritated because this person is pulling something up the hill and is now causing so much unneeded traffic because further up there's a robot that's out because of load shedding and a corrupt government. All of those things may be outside of our bubble, but actually they really, really are. We're inside of their bubble. There are lots of us in those bubbles inside a bigger bubble. And once we start to break down those bubbles and we understand that that man pulling that cart is just an ordinary person who really is fighting to put bread on his table as well, and also has a wife that is worried is going to leave him, and has a child who wants to go to university, but you don't know how you're going to even pay her school fees, and she's in grade 7. These are the realities, and I share that as a real life example. I am deliberate about waste pickers as an example.
Great example, yeah.
Such an important part of our society. It's an informal part of the economic sector. Yet they are playing a vital role in moving waste that we are creating, and yet we want to disconnect ourselves from the other people and humans that actually make this world work.
These are the bubbles within the bubbles. It's starting to sound a lot like string theory, which is fascinating. But thank you. Look, we're going to go on a short commercial break right now. But as we go into the break, I want to ask you a question. When we come back, let's see what you have to say. Was there ever a time when you were not an activist? With that, we're going into a break. We'll be back with Reality Radio and Catherine Constantinides in a minute.
You're listening to 919. Nine 919 has signed a code of conduct that is enforced by the Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa. Under the code, we are committed to giving news that is accurate, comment that is fair, programming that is not harmful to children and that does not amount to hate speech or the description of gratuitous violence or explicit sex. If you think we're not living up to that code, you can inform the BCCSA. Direct any complaints in writing to the Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa to PO Box 412-365, Craig Hall 2024, or email the BCCSA at napsa.co.za. For more information, visit the bccsa.co.za. We all love a good story. Stories of love and life. Stories that entertain and inspire. And the best stories are the ones that happen to be true. Every Friday night, Jack Devnarain is live in conversation with an iconic South African personality who shares the true stories that shape their remarkable lives. Join us for Reality Radio, as real as it gets. From 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. every Friday night, only on 919. Breakfast on demand.
Here's something that came in. Now, this sounds like something I probably would have done back in the day. So back before cell phones were the norm for kids, I called my crush at home, obviously on a home phone, around midnight, and we had a long chat. So we decided after some time, now you got to picture this, okay, that I should sneak over to her house. Now, being 13 at the time, I obviously couldn't drive. So I snuck out and rode my bicycle for almost an hour to get to her house. By the time I got there, she was fast asleep. I ended up getting caught sneaking back into my own house. It makes me think of Celine Dion. I drove all night.
With Shane Hunter, Monday to Friday, 6 to 9 a.m. on 919. The Feel Good Drive with Nicole De Silva on 919.
A person within this. Being in that space at all, it sort of elevates you to where other people would like to use you. I'm now at a point where I'll say no. So I can see it from a mile away. Someone you don't hear from in forever and always sends you a message. Hey, friend! Friend, long time!
Oh my gosh, what are you up to?
Not even how you, straight into, do you mind doing this for me?
Hell no.
Hell no. I've had to learn how to say no. And then there's not even friends, there's people that work in the industry that like to take advantage.
The Feel Good Drive, 3 to 6 p.m. on 919.
We're back. You're listening to 919. This is Jack Devnarain with Reality Radio in conversation this evening with Catherine Constantinides. Just before we went to the break, there was a quick question. It might have seemed innocuous, but I know there's a lot more to it. Was there ever a time when you were not an activist? How long ago might that have been? Is it even possible you weren't?
You're making me think really hard here, because the earliest memories I have, I was fighting for something, or I was backing a cause,
Yeah.
or so it's a really good question, because I've never thought of my life in that manner. And so I'd have to say that I was probably born and shaped and molded an activist by my parents, by my father, and I never even realized it. And I would not possibly have labeled it as such, but I remember one of my earliest memories was in fact writing letters to Nelson Mandela as president, and I was determined to give him ideas and thoughts and solutions to the things that I felt were.
How old were you then?
I was about 7.
Excellent.
6 or 7. I remember, I remember specifically writing these letters and begging my parents to send off each one. And I must tell you, bless them, they always used to tell me that they did, but I always wondered if they had or hadn't. But one day I came home from school, and there was a letter in the postbox.
Yeah.
And I saw my name on that letter, and as I pulled it out, it had a blue seal on the back of the letter.
Wow.
And it said, Desk of the President. And
That was a game changer.
that was a game changer. From that moment, I remember holding on to that letter for dear life. And I look back now and I realize that President Mandela probably didn't write the letter, but he did sign it. And
You still have it?
Yes.
Oh, excellent.
Yes.
Of course you do.
And all the letters that were written by children to him, actually, which I did not know until recently, live in a book somewhere in Parliament. And they were all printed and put into one massive book that lives somewhere in
I wonder,
Parliament.
it could possibly even be the Nelson Mandela Centre of Memory
It could be there. I haven't seen it there.
in their archive.
It could possibly be there
They
as well.
have the most incredible archive. It's a basement archive.
It's beautiful.
It is filled with the most incredible gifts, sculptures, works of fine art, certificates, awards. It's completely mind-blowingly beautiful, as a concentration of the most wonderful gifts, and because people loved Madiba from around the world. I mean,
Absolutely.
you remember how he was
Yes.
revered. So it's all contained there, and it's a very, very special, beautifully sealed room as well. Rows and rows of shelves, everything very well contained and catalogued, as you can imagine.
A really special place to actually visit. Especially we live right here.
That's right.
It's
It's
one
right
of
here in
those things
Joburg,
that
yeah.
we really have to take the time and make sure that we go and see. But yes, certainly. So I think, answering your question, looking back at my life, definitely I think I don't see a time that I was never an activist. So, you go through different phases and different moments of your life and different milestones, be it as a mother, as a teenager, whatever it might be. And I think back to these different moments now because you've really awakened me looking at it from a different perspective.
Yeah.
And I think actually, I'm going to have to admit to being an activist always.
Do you feel sometimes that the sacrifices that you've made in your life because of your work as an activist, as an environmentalist, as a defender of human rights, that must take a lot out of you? Have you stopped to count the cost?
I can't afford to stop and count the cost. But I do know indeed there is a huge cost. There is a huge risk. But I also am cognizant of the fact that the biggest price paid for the activism and the work that I do and my fight for human rights and justice is paid by my little boy. Because every moment that I am working on a cause, I'm away from him. And that's a truth and that's a reality. And I can only hope that one day when he's older, he will look back at his life and mine and he will understand fully. As a young child, he has always had a very good grasp and understanding of what Mama was doing.
Yeah.
But I really hope that one day he will look back and he will feel that the sacrifice that he had to make, knowingly or unknowingly, was worth seeing the freedom of people, seeing justice, seeing climate action where we live in a world where these are some of the things that we don't have to be fighting for.
Those wheels turn on another scale altogether, though. It's the kind of progress that you see, every
Yes.
20, 25, 30 years or so. You don't get immediate returns on the work that you do as an environmentalist, as a political figure as well. You did mention earlier, though, that your dad was a powerful influence to you when it came to being an active citizen. Do you think, what was it, firstly, about your dad that made you feel that way? What in him gave you that?
I must tell you, Jack, when I look back at my life, and even as a teenager, looking back at my childhood, I'd look back and I realized there were things that I believed that the world was, but they weren't, in the sense that giving of ourselves and being of service to others was innately what we did as a family. It was what I saw my father do. I thought all people did that. I thought that every Saturday people went to townships and played bingo in halls with community members, that
Really?
at Christmas, absolutely.
Love
I
that.
thought at
Love
Christmas everybody cooked and took the food
Yeah.
somewhere else to a community and ate with that community. These were the things that I thought that everybody did because that's what we did. It wasn't something we had to think, oh, we got to find time to do this, or we've got to find. No,
Yeah.
it's what we did as a family. It's who my parents were. And putting that alongside the fact that I grew up in a very humble home. I remember there was a significant period as a child where we did not have meat because we couldn't afford it. There were winters where I remember we did not have electricity because it was switched off because my parents couldn't afford to pay it.
Sure.
Now, this is a story of a South African you would not expect to be white. And it's one of the reasons I hate the fact that I need to be defined by my color, because the circumstances that I've lived and where I work, I have immersed myself in those communities and I've lived in those spaces so that if it's not an experience that I've had, I fully grasp and understand the situation on the ground in order to fight for it, in order or against it rather.
Yeah, that's an important point you make, because you have to be able to understand how suffering is felt in order to want to do something about that. And the reason this sticks in my mind is because the media right now is still going through this. There was a comment by, I think, the vice chair of the National Council of Provinces, who mentioned something about load shedding and saying it's not the end of the world. And she has been absolutely slated, in my opinion, rightfully so.
100%.
Because she demonstrated a profound ignorance of how people actually feel suffering, of which load shedding is one aspect. So again, you have to know what it feels like in order to want to do something about it. And I think you've made that transition very clear in your life. I know what this feels like, but now you've translated this into action. Do you feel as if you'll ever do enough?
Unfortunately, there's so much to do that I never feel like
Yeah.
I've done enough or I could possibly do enough. But the one thing I remember, it was freezing cold. We had very little, but no matter how little we had, my parents would still fill the car by loaves of bread and would take us into Hillbrow, and we would go and hand out that bread and soup 10, 11 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
On the coldest nights, I remember seeing my father open the car window and take the only jacket that he owned off and give it to the man at the robot. And that moment could have been yesterday. It is etched in my mind.
Sure.
He did not have another jacket to go with to work the next day. But he said, at least he had a job to go to. And I will never forget the impact that he had. He was nobody that anybody would know
Yeah.
by name, but he was a giant of a man. And as a human being, I can only hope to follow in his footsteps, because they would be impossible to fill. But he's one of those giant humans. And when he passed, there were people that came out of nowhere and shared the most remarkable stories of things he did for them in their lives that we were that gave us some kind of consoled us in the most painful moment of our lives.
Did your son and your dad spend time together? How old was your boy then?
My dad was very ill for the last 15 years of his life.
I see.
However, he did get about 5 to 6 years with Matthew. And Matthew, in fact, was with him on his bed when he passed away.
Right.
And he spent significant time with him in that first 5-6 years.
Then I think your concerns about whether your son will truly appreciate and understand your sacrifice, I think he'll get it. There was a beautiful story that a good friend and stand-up comedian Al Prodgers shared with me. We were on a break between scenes when he had a short stint on Isidingo with me many years ago. And he, obviously in his mind, he was always going through moments that he would be able to reflect on in his stand-up comedy. And he was talking about how close to the edge we are as performers, talking about there is no guaranteed paycheck at the end of the day. And he was saying that he was driving to a gig one day. He stops at the traffic light. There's a guy who comes up to his window asking for some money. And in that moment, Al said he realized as a performer, he is one paycheck away from the guy outside his window. So with that very sobering thought, and also from a great storyteller, Al Prodgers, let's just take a quick break, and we'll come back to Reality Radio with Catherine right here in studio. And let's go through more of your stories and recollections when we're back.
Reality Radio, as real as it gets.
Calling all tech enthusiasts and innovators, Empire Partner Foundation is excited to announce our upcoming hackathon events. Get ready to unleash your creativity and showcase your tech skills. Our hackathons is where innovation thrives. Join us and be a part of something extraordinary. EPF's hackathon events, where your tech dreams come to life. Check out our website for event dates and registration details at empirepartnerfoundation.org.
919 has signed a code of conduct that is enforced by the Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa. Under the code, we are committed to giving news that is accurate, comment that is fair, programming that is not harmful to children and that does not amount to hate speech, or the description of gratuitous violence or explicit sex. If you think we're not living up to that code, you can inform the BCCSA. Direct any complaints in writing to the Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa to PO Box 412-365, Craig Hall 2024. Or email the BCCSA at napsa.co.za. For more information, visit the bccsa.co.za. We all love a good story. Stories of love and life. Stories that entertain and inspire. And the best stories are the ones that happen to be true. Every Friday night, Jack Devnarain is live in conversation with an iconic South African personality who shares the true stories that shape their remarkable lives. Join us for Reality Radio, as real as it gets. From 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. every Friday night, only on 919. Reality Radio, as real as it gets, only on 919.
Reality Radio on a Friday night with Catherine Constantinides. Catherine, what was the biggest platform you've ever had as an international speaker?
I've been very privileged to speak at the United Nations.
Okay, it doesn't get bigger than that, I have to say. United Nations, all right. No, that's the trump card right there.
That was amazing, both in Geneva on several occasions, and then at the UN Security Council in New York. And that for me was, an opportunity to really amplify what I was doing and what I was seeing on the ground, and being able to share the real life stories of what is actually going on. Because sometimes leaders are very disconnected, completely disconnected actually, from what is happening on the ground. They sit in powerful seats, but those seats are far away from what is happening. And I see that all the time here at home. I work in Orange Farm. Every single week on Wednesdays and Thursdays, I'm on the ground in Orange Farm, in Aldo's, all of these communities in the south of Joburg. And I cannot tell you how often I will be told that councillors have not been there in probably a 3 or 4 year period, that they've not seen anyone from a political party. That only happens when they are gifted with a t-shirt, a food hamper. They're so disconnected from what is happening, and we need leaders who are on the ground.
It's a different language, though, isn't it? When you go from working with the communities that really need the assistance, and I know you spend a lot of your time with those communities, you know those families on a first name basis. When you take, there's the other side of you where you would then get an opportunity to address the United Nations, for example. It requires a change in language. Mm-hmm. There is a diplomatic language. It's almost as if there's a change in the way you are supposed to structure the issues that you are dealing with on the ground in order to present at that forum. Do you think that there's ever a successful translation into that diplomatic language so that people actually get what it is we are talking about?
I think you have to say it as it is.
Really? Just as...
absolutely. And
okay.
I think that's probably caused me more troubles and problems than anything else, especially with my activism on Western Sahara. I mean, I will work within the UN system, specifically in Geneva, and you will know there are mercenaries who work within the system. They will come, they will threaten you, they will violate your privacy. They will come into sessions where you are listed to speak, and they start shouting and screaming. They cause chaos in order to scare you, to get you to leave, to get you to never come back. And so therefore I am determined to continue going back. And every time I'm asked to speak, I have to be there, because you have to show up and you have to say things as they are, because it's not just... Yes, there's a way to present things, because different fora ask for a different presentation of information, but we can never distort the truth.
And do people, are people intimidated by you, do you think? Or do people find you...
I hope so.
Okay, good. That's what we want. I don't think you like to present yourself as a politician, even though you move in political circles. I don't think you see yourself as a diplomat, even though you move in diplomatic circles. So, have you just completely defied definition?
I'd like to think I have. You know, for me, it's really important. It's not that I want people to be scared of me or to be intimidated, but I want them to be uncomfortable because of the truth that I share. Yeah. I want to be able to walk into a room and people think, oh my gosh, she's going to open her mouth and say things as they are, and she's going to present a truth in this space that we'd rather not hear. And when you're doing that, I have to believe I'm standing on the right side of history, and that's why I make people uncomfortable. And so I have to continue being true to myself in that manner and sharing the reality of what is happening on the ground. Being in diplomatic spaces and political spaces allows me to do the same. And therefore, I have to use that platform, be it with a audience of 10 people or an audience of 10,000 people. And I need to do what I have to do in order to ensure everyone who leaves that room is not only uncomfortable, but is pushed to really address the reality that is faced.
I remember being at a function that you addressed once. It was a wonderful... it was lovely, because do you remember there was a little patch outside where there was actual sand? Yes. And then you invited people just to take their shoes off, step into that little square where the sand was, take a picture, and that would be a statement in itself. Do you realize, for weeks after that, I was getting threatening messages?
I'm so sorry.
No, it was the funniest thing to me. But because it showed me the kind of reach you had. And how important that message was, because I'm obviously seen in a different kind of space with different kind of activism, but just in that moment of us overlapping, it obviously became so threatening to some people.
That's incredible. That's incredible. Wow.
Yeah. So good for you then.
I'm so happy, actually.
Do you find sometimes people can actually find a strong, independent woman in itself quite intimidating, where people... Yes. Okay, so it's not just something that I've heard. This is a real thing.
No, it is.
Yeah.
I still can't understand why, but definitely I think men and women are intimidated by strong women. I often say, and I know that this is a very unpopular thing to say, and some women will hate me for saying it, but I think women are their own worst enemy. Women are women's enemies. I think that we, instead of galvanizing with each other and ensuring that we present a united front, that we're strengthening each other's causes, that we're pushing for each other, that we're fighting each other's fight in rooms that they may not be in, we forget that when we don't do that, we give men a different strength. And I think that men are also intimidated by strong women for a whole lot of reasons. But I think that, it's a really unfortunate thing. I do hate it if somebody tells me they're intimidated by me. I think it's the worst thing, because I'd hate to think that I'm intimidating unless you're Moroccan. But other than that, I really don't mind.
Is that a patriarchal thing that you're talking about?
Very much patriarchal, and also because I speak on Western Sahara, so they would feel threatened.
Okay, and that's just by default.
Default, yes.
Okay, and then how do you just make sure that you are in balance, just with yourself? Like, how do you check in with yourself just to make sure that you're carrying the right message for the right people, for the right reasons? And how do you plan your activism ahead? And where did you learn that from?
So checking in with myself, I think, is a daily duty and responsibility, not just to myself, but to the communities in which I serve. Because if I don't check in with myself, and if I'm not alive to how I'm feeling when I'm actually not okay, and being okay with not being okay, if I am not, there's that analogy of, are you the kind of person that sees the cup half full or half empty? I believe we all come completely full, but we allow ourselves to become empty, or to see the glass half empty, half full, based on the people that we engage with, based on the situations we allow ourselves to be part of, based on toxic relationships or healthy relationships. And that is on us. We don't arrive as a half glass. We actually arrive full. And it's for us to continue to replenish that cup, and to continue to make sure that it's not just half full, but it's completely full. Because how else are we going to give to others? How else are we going to show up as the best version of ourselves in any situation, at home, at work? I also am a fundamental believer that there is no such thing as balance. Often people say, oh, well, how do you find a balance, and how do you maintain balance? I don't believe there's such a thing.
I agree.
I think every day I have to wake up and I have to make choices. What's going to give? And on every single day, it's something different. So on this specific day, it might be family that has to give, because there's something that's extremely pressing. Tomorrow, it might be a project, a campaign. And we also have to define what is the difference between urgent and important, because they're not the same thing. And we bundle them as the same things. Sometimes something is really important, and that means that it does not have to be addressed in this exact moment. It needs a prolonged approach. But something that's urgent might need an attention right now, but you may not need to be the person that gives it the attention. But if you don't show up as the best version of yourself, if you don't are not in tune with what you're feeling, what you're thinking, the kinds of spaces that you occupy, and allow people into the space that is yours, you're not going to arrive as the best version of yourself. My activism is very difficult to have a forward-thinking plan, because things happen, and the world happens, and life happens. There are fundamental principles I believe in. There are fundamental values that I live by. And as we walk that journey to bring light into the darkest corners of communities, give voice to the forgotten people of our world, on that journey, you pick up other things. People find you. People ask you to champion something, and you can't champion everything.
No.
And saying no is a really hard thing. For someone like me, saying no it's soul destroying. But it's a really important lesson I've had to learn.
Of keeping the glass full.
You have to keep the glass full. And you cannot be everything to everybody, even though sometimes it's innately who you are. Because unfortunately, some of us, it's just who we are. We want to please everyone.
I like the idea as an activist that you are actually never going to achieve balance.
Yes.
Because if there is something that's driving you, and your objective is to change something, it necessarily means that something will have to be broken in order to be reformed and rebalanced. And that's why achieving balance every day, to me, tells me you're marking time. You're not going to go anywhere with your activism. So give me an example then of a healthy relationship and a toxic relationship that you have come across in the work that you've done around the world.
Okay. So for me, healthy relationships, we share the same vision. We have an understanding of where we're working towards. Sometimes, and it can be two people who you share a relationship with someone, you don't have to be fighting the same cause, but you understand where I'm working towards a specific goal, and I understand the journey you're on and what you're wanting to achieve. That's a healthy relationship. Being able to in the sense of activism, share resources or be a sounding board for someone, because in the space it's a really lonely one and it's a very dark and difficult one. Yeah. So finding people who you can trust with your thoughts, with your frustrations, with ideas, that's a hard thing. And so when you find that, you grab onto those people and you cherish them and you look after them as much as you would like them to look after you. Sometimes you may not even see these people, or I've found in my journey, you don't always see that person or those people on a regular basis. You may touch base once every few years, once every 18 months, 3 years, but the power of it is that you share a shared set of values, and so it doesn't matter what your individual journeys are, you're able to support each other, you're able to feed each other and strengthen each other on that journey.
Well, those journeys and the adventure continues with Reality Radio. We're going to come back after this break, talking to Catherine Constantinides and me, Jack Devnarain.
You're listening to 919. We all love a good story. Stories of love and life. Stories that entertain and inspire. And the best stories are the ones that happen to be true. Every Friday night, Jack Devnarain is live in conversation with an iconic South African personality who shares the true stories that shape their remarkable lives. Join us for Reality Radio, as real as it gets. From 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. every Friday night, only on 919. Breakfast on demand.
Here's something that came in. Now, this sounds like something I probably would have done back in the day. So back before cell phones were the norm for kids, I called my crush at home, obviously on a home phone, around midnight, and we had a long chat. So we decided after some time, now you got to picture this, okay, that I should sneak over to her house. Now, being 13 at the time, I obviously couldn't drive. So I snuck out and rode my bicycle for almost an hour to get to her house. By the time I got there, she was fast asleep. I ended up getting caught sneaking back into my own house. It makes me think of Celine Dion. I drove all night.
With Shane Hunter, Monday to Friday, 6 to 9 a.m. on 919. Stay positive. 919.
You're listening to 919. This is Reality Radio on a Friday night. My name is Jack Devnarain, and we are in conversation today, getting real stories from real people tonight with Catherine Constantinides. Catherine, what is it about working with children that just inspires you to continue? Because I see a lot of your social media posts have to do with just the absolute joy in captured in the kids' eyes when you're with them. You actually share it. Are you actually still a kid?
I really hope I am, because
yes,
I think humans, I don't know when it is, but at some point in our journey of growing up, human beings forget the fundamental things that children don't forget. We forget to look at the world with big, bright eyes.
Yes.
We forget that, in fact, we shouldn't arrive in a space and have a set prejudice about somebody or a set idea about somebody. Children are children. And when you watch and you observe them, you remember what it feels like to look at somebody and not worry about where they come from or who they are or who their family is or what their circumstances are. You remember how to have fun, how to live in that moment.
Yeah.
I look at my own child and I see that some of the things he does, I embrace them because he reminds me that somewhere along the line we forgot those things. You know, if he gets a new pair of shoes, or if it's a new shirt that he's got that he really wanted for a long time and he gets it, he doesn't wait for an occasion to wear it. He will wear it immediately.
Right then, yeah.
He enjoys it there and then. And so often people turn around and say, oh, no, don't wear it now. Wait. He's like, but what? This is I wanted this. This is and I'm reminded that there's that spirit that we are born with. And human beings are innately born good. You see that in children. You see how no matter what their circumstances are, they still smile.
Yeah.
They still find joy. And I've found that with children all over the world except for one place. And I will never, ever, until the day I die, forget seeing children who did not understand the emotion of happiness. In fact, they were uncomfortable by it because they could not understand it. And that was in Afghanistan.
Oh, wow. So you had time in Afghanistan as well, spending time.
Yep.
Where? What was the community and the
So
context?
I was in Kabul, and I worked on the mountains of Kabul, and we were working specifically to get food to people on a long-term sustainable basis. Many of the women we worked with were widows and had children, many children that they were left with, and they cannot look after their children, and they land up selling them. And so you meet women that you have to go into the situation and allow your mind to understand the exceptional circumstances she finds herself in order to be able to sell a daughter at the age of 8.
Yeah.
And it's a horrifying thing. But when you immerse yourself in her shoes and you fully understand what she has to grapple with, and when you see where she's living in caves in the mountain with no water or electricity, when they tell you that they ate 3 days ago and they boiled 1 potato amongst 5 people, including their children, you understand that there are people in this world that are living with less than nothing. And our shared humanity sometimes gives hope and light to somebody who doesn't know how they're going to survive until tomorrow.
How do those kids react talking about they didn't know how to process happiness? What does that mean, and how did it come across?
You know, when you spend time and you go back to a family or back into a home, and a child becomes a little bit more familiar with you, and they actually then start to get excited that they know you're coming or that you're there, you realize that they feel the emotion of happiness, but they don't know how to express it. You realize that you've made them laugh and they almost pull back because they didn't know that they could laugh. You don't understand how it's such an unbelievable thing to be with children that only know anger, that only know hate, and they're 2, 3, 4 years old. And so when they feel this emotion of happiness, or when you make them laugh and then they're not sure what that is, and they're both excited and scared.
That is so difficult. That's incredible.
It's such an unbelievable thing to experience, because that is not how human beings should be. So the circumstances should never be such that a child does not know what it's like to feel happiness. So I revel in the fact that I work in communities, no matter what the circumstances are, children can be happy and they find happiness and joy. And sometimes, you know, the last few weeks we've been handing out school shoes, brand new school shoes, to children whose shoes are sewn together with fish guts, or the back of the shoes have been cut off so they can slide their foot in. Their shoes are so rotten that you can literally smell the shoe from a meter away. When you take off the little sock, if he's wearing one, his little foot is completely soiled in sores because that shoe is so broken inside and is moldy, etc. But when he can still feel happiness and joy, he can still run and laugh and play, you realize we have a responsibility to those children and to that generation, and we cannot fail them.
You also spent a lot of time with the refugee camps in the Western Sahara.
Yes.
And it's almost as if you got a whole family there.
It is.
Isn't that right? Because those kids just love it when you pitch up.
Yeah, very much.
And you schedule this months in advance, obviously.
So sometimes it's months in advance. Sometimes it is this afternoon at 4:30. I, was arranging to try to get there next week because there's a window of opportunity that I
Okay.
can go. But I have the Sahrawi people are definitely my other nation. They're my people. I go there and I'm known as the daughter of the Sahara, which for me, I'm completely opposite in every way. And I'm sure they can see me from the moon when I'm there. But I have found another home.
Yeah.
I can't believe I would have a longing for a refugee camp, but I long for the people. I long for the time we spend together, the things that we're able to share, the learnings that I can give them in some small way. But just being able to be there to listen to them, I think is one of the greatest things that they want of me, and they want of me to take their stories outside of those camps, because right now they're stuck.
That's a huge thing, though, because you then have a responsibility to honor their wish, to honor the stories that they have to tell, and to make sure that they are honestly being distributed through the world. And how do you think that's going as a project? Like, what do you need in order to deliver on that compact?
It's a huge ask, and it's a massive responsibility on my shoulders. But I'm determined that in my lifetime, I will be in a free Western Sahara with the Sahrawis, and I will tell the grandchildren of the children that are in those camps now about what their parents or grandparents had to fight through. I am determined to tell the stories of the Sahrawis to the free Sahrawi children in a free Western Sahara. That will happen in my lifetime. That is my goal. And so I have to carry their stories with great respect, dignity, and pride, and tell them as far and wide as I can. And platforms such as this, allowing me to speak on something that's really not popular. It is not mainstream media.
It's not sexy.
It is absolutely not sexy. And so it's so far removed. Like it's so far removed. And so I think that that's the biggest thing. You can't scratch at the surface of media, and people don't. People just listen to what they hear on the news bulletin. That's where it stops, and people don't realize what's happening in the world. So to carry their stories is an immense responsibility. It comes with great risk. It comes with a great amount of challenge in itself. But I just constantly need people to hear those stories and then go and do their own homework. Go and read up on Western Sahara. Go and find out for yourself. But know and be aware that in fact in Africa there is a lost colony, and it's been colonized and occupied by a brotherly state.
What was it like for you voting for the very first time in South Africa? Because this is now we're heading into the closing the show, and I'm wondering, South Africans are quite lucky. And I think it's disappointing almost to see how few young people are connecting into the big political questions of the day, asking about political party manifestos, and interrogating political leaders about them and about accountability. So what was it like voting for the very first time? And do you think young South African people, feel anything close to what we did when we voted for the first time in '94?
So I think I voted, I think it was around 2004 or 5, around there would have been the first time I voted. And going out to vote, I had seen my parents go to vote, and I think I had gone with them. And once my father let me stand in the ballot box with them while he was, and so I remember those things. And I think that young people, South Africans, need to understand, and it's how we started the show, we need to be better active citizens. We need to be better South Africans, not just dreaming about the kind of South Africa we want, but I would rather urge young South Africans to dream of the kind of South African they would like to be.
So we have a responsibility when it comes to that as well.
Absolutely. We do.
So voter education.
Yes.
Talking about how do we improve the lives of all people? How do we improve service delivery? How do we increase accountability in government? And all the spheres of government, from local to provincial and national. are we doing anything right?
I think that we do all of that right, but far too late. Voter education shouldn't happen in the year of voting. Voter education should happen from now until the next election. It should be what happens in between the 4-year, 5-year periods when we have the different municipal elections and national elections. It shouldn't be something that happens for 6 months. It's a campaign. We tick the box, we move on. Children should grow up. These are the kinds of things that should be taught in LO. These are the skills South African students need, or South Africans need. We need to understand how we participate in a democratic country. How do we engage on a street-to-street basis? How many of us know the name of our councillors? How many of us have the phone number of our councillor? How many of us know the channels to use when there is a light that's not working or there's water running down our road?
Yeah.
We take a photo, we post it on social media, and we complain. But did we actually log a call? Did we report it? Do we have a number?
Yeah.
No. And so we need to be better citizens. And that starts with educating young people about how to be a South African citizen. What are the legalities that we are a part of? How do the systems work with us and for us? And we need to be doing that consistently, not just in a voting period.
And there is a way, I think also, because I see a lot of people get this wrong. There is a way of being an active, responsible citizen without breaking stuff.
Absolutely.
Without burning it. Without
Yes.
you don't need the rage and the violence in order to be an active participant in democracy.
Unfortunately, as South Africans, it's one thing that we have to really work hard at unlearning and relearning, because we have got a culture of breaking, of burning, toying. This is part of it. It's a cultural, it's part of our culture DNA as South Africans. Nowhere else in the world does this happen. It's really quite unique to us. People will go out in masses, they will protest, but the violence that we see related to that is something we need to unlearn, and we need to relearn better ways of engaging and making sure that our voices are heard without us being left without a clinic, without libraries, etc.
Catherine, I'm glad my bubble met your bubble. And
me
thank
too.
you for being in our bubble on 919. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for joining us, everybody. That's Reality Radio on a Friday night with me, Jack Devnarain. Tonight's guest, Catherine Constantinides. Always a pleasure to see you and connect with you. Make sure you join us again next Friday night for more Reality Radio.